Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Missing Frames. This is the podcast where we watch all of the movies we should have seen by this point in our lives. I'm your host, Shawn Eastridge. We're hanging out on the Nerd Party Network, a collection of podcasts dedicated to all things entertainment. Check us out at thenerdparty.com and make sure you're following us on Twitter, X, Blue Sky, at Join Nerd Party on Twitter and X. And I don't know what is it on Blue Sky? What even is Blue Sky? I don't know what's happening.
I honestly don't know. I'm so sorry. You might as well ask me what we are on TikTok.
Who are we? Who even is? What is this? What are the kids using these days?
I proudly hit a point where, as more social networks came out, I was like, "Look, guys, I just can't do this anymore. I'm the old man. I'm just staying frozen. It's all good.
Tapping out. You can
God
find the
bless you
Nerd
all.
Party. It's out there on all the places, and go follow. Be a pal. Be a buddy. That voice you're hearing, the sultry tones you're hearing on the other side of the microphone are those of one Mr. John Mills. It's been a minute, John. Welcome back to the show.
I'm so pleased to be back. Missing Frames is one of my favorite shows, Shawn. And you know what? For anybody who's tuning in who didn't hear it, they should go back and they should listen to everything that you did in the count up to Superman, James Gunn's Superman. And you did an incredible series counting down to that. And I don't know that I've gotten a chance on mic to congratulate you on what an absolutely amazing series it was. Like, it's the whole reason that this medium of podcasting exists is so that cool stuff like that can happen. It happened on Missing Frames. Go back and listen to his catalog, guys, because it is well worth it.
I really appreciate it, and it was such a blast to do. And the best part is now all the Superman followers I've gained from that will abandon ship, because now we're going back to talking about film and cinema.
Whoa. Martin Scorsese is in the Star Wars universe. All rules of cinema are out the window, my friend.
Has been being
Nobody's
rewritten.
allowed to criticize anything anymore.
100%. We're on a whole other level now. But
absolutely.
But not only is 2026, we have Supergirl coming out this summer, and we'll talk plenty about that. But 2026 is actually the 10-year anniversary of Missing Frames. I've been doing this.
Are you kidding me?
As of November, I have been doing this 10 years. Is that
oh my gosh?
Nuts? Which means the Nerd Party has been around for 10 years, which is
more than. Hasn't it been more than?
It was right around.
Because Aggressive Negotiations, I think we're the OG. We're the last standing OG. Aggressive Negotiations, a Star Wars podcast. If you'd like to go and listen to that, it's a really good show, I think.
It is fantastic.
But it's and we take weeks off every now and then because we're human beings and we have to. And we're at 426 episodes.
Oh, Lord.
And that's like weekly. So however many years that works out to, because you got to plus a few more weeks here and there because we took time off. But
so much math. I don't like any of this math. But
when I say time off, I mean literally just 1 week here and there. Like,
right.
That's what we do.
No, you guys have been chipping away, and it's incredible. But it's like, we've been doing this for a decade now, which is just insane.
I still remember helping design the logo.
Yes. I remember pitching to Tristan. He was like, you should join the Nerd Party. What would you do? And I'm like, a film podcast. He's like, okay, what's the angle? And I'm like, I don't know. We watched the movies we should have seen. And he's like, okay, let's run with that.
And a little bit of anniversary trivia for everybody then is that the Missing Frames logo, the show art that you see come up in your podcatcher, was in fact inspired by the bit in the video for Closer by 9 Inch Nails, where it says frame missing. That was the actual inspiration point for it.
I've never seen that video. I've got to check that out.
Actual inspiration point for it.
That's amazing.
And that was my pitch for it.
See, I'm learning something new about my show 10 years down the line that I didn't know.
Right?
This is incredible.
And one of the original members of the Nerd Party, there was only one person. There was maybe 2 people that caught it when they saw it, where they're like, "Hey, is that?" I was like, "It sure is."
That's amazing. I love it. Well, now I have to watch that video. That's great. Any excuse to watch a 9 Inch Nails video is okay by me.
It's always good.
This is good. But we're hanging out and we're watching a movie that you have never seen this time around. An Akira Kurosawa masterpiece, yet another masterpiece by this Kurosawa dude. High and Low. And I did not realize you hadn't seen it until we were talking about doing a Kurosawa, and you said this one.
I will admit that my level of Kurosawa knowledge is way too limited. I know all about his life and his impact on Western film, world film. And I've seen, you're a Star Wars fan. You can't call yourself a Star Wars fan unless you've watched The Seven Samurai and Hidden Fortress.
Right.
Like that's just required. But there are a whole lot of his films where they're always those ones that I intend to be like, oh, I'm going to go check that out. And then you never get around to it because you're busy watching Jack Frost because it's free on Prime. And you're like, that's 90 minutes of my life.
The Michael Keaton movie?
Oh, no. Oh, no. That would have been too highbrow for me, my friend. I'm talking about the horror movie that came out. Oh, yes. Oh, that's an exquisite 90 minutes. Even I question my life choices.
I was going to say one of the great landmarks of Missing Frames history is I actually had Joseph Cross, the young boy in the film Jack Frost with Michael Keaton. He is a wonderful actor and filmmaker, and he was on the show a few years ago for the Atlanta Film Festival promoting a film of his. But I was just trying to, bring it all around, but we blew it. We blew it. It's the horror film. Another thing on, we'll put it on the Missing Frames queue.
No. I'm going to advise against that one.
Fair enough.
But I'm very interested to see, High and Low, because Spike Lee just did an adaptation of it, Highest to Lowest, with Denzel Washington. And it didn't get great notices, but like I still want to give that one a try. But I don't want to give that one a try until I've seen the original.
Yes.
So yeah.
And this is I similar to you. Like when I went to film school, obviously my experience and understanding of Kurosawa, who he was The Hidden Fortress, George Lucas, obviously a major influence on Star Wars. And the first one I watched of his was Seven Samurai, and I adored it. I was like, well, that's fantastic. And I would eventually went back and I watched Rashomon, and I got to Hidden Fortress, and I kind of went through all his films. And really, when you and I were working together when we first met, I was going through a pretty intense, that's probably maybe the first real like intense Kurosawa phase where I got a bunch of his movies and was really sitting down and watching through them. And I think that might have been, I may have seen High and Low in film school or maybe a little bit before then, but I think that was probably about when I saw High and Low for the first time. Okay. And I won't say too much about it, obviously, in this first part, because I want you to go in with fresh eyes and perspective. But I will say it immediately was like, it felt like at the time, because George Lucas's love of Hidden Fortress and Seven Samurai, and those were the ones that were so well known by everybody. And High and Low was one that people hadn't talked about. And I remember when it came up in my queue, it was kind of like, well, this is the next one to watch, so I'll watch it. And I just remember being so like, why aren't more people talking about this? And in the years since, it's definitely like it is. I think it ranks very, very highly with Kurosawa fans as far as like what are his great films of all time. And I think High and Low's reputation has only continued to grow, and it is. Yeah, I hate the first part of Missing Frames. For the person who has seen and loved the film, the challenge is not overhyping and not overselling it. But I think the reputation it has of being a masterpiece and being one of the great works of cinema is completely merited. I think you are in for a real treat, and especially having seen you've only seen Seven Samurai and Hidden Fortress so
I've seen
far?
Seven Samurai, I've seen Hidden Fortress, I've seen Rashomon.
Okay.
Those are the only three I know for sure that I've seen. And people might say, oh, well, how could you have seen one and not recall it? Believe it or not, even me, there are occasionally movies where I can't recall whether I've seen them, but those are the three that I know for sure that I've seen.
Right.
And I think Rashomon, I felt obligated to see it because The Simpsons, one of their greatest jokes of all time, references.
That's not how I remember it.
Yes, exactly. That joke is so much funnier when you've seen the movie.
So good. And you can't overstate. It's easy to say, well, he inspired Star Wars, but Kurosawa, his level of craft,
please.
He's a master. Like he is arguably.
I would put forth that Kurosawa, just with a little bit that I know, Kurosawa basically is an unattributed shaper of the American Western.
Yeah.
Like it's like
Oh,
him and
yeah.
John Ford did those. They're the two guys that like made the American Western happen,
Yeah.
because his stories were so. But even that gets into a really interesting thing where the whole samurai era and medieval Europe, and Renaissance Europe, like have these weird similarities about them. And it's like,
Right?
I think that's why Kurosawa plugs in so well with Western audiences, is there's that kernel that is very relatable at like just a base level. Cause you had like at the Ronin, and then you had the Shire Reeves. And it's like, when you did like an actual historical analysis, it's like, well, actually the way their societies were set up was actually pretty similar, guys. And then like
Yeah.
the American West is pretty similar as well, with the sheriff and the bandits and everything. You're like, whoa, like,
And it's so funny, like all of that 100%. And Kurosawa in his own culture and in his own country was criticized for being too Western. Like they were like, oh, you're
crazy.
too, exactly. Yeah, it's just, and all of this, this is all hearsay. And in retrospect, we can look back and say like, oh, that's absurd. But it's like at the time, he was, what we know now is that he is essentially one of the pillars of cinema, period, of the
Yep.
art form. Like,
Yes.
you can't, it's not an exaggeration. It's not hyperbole. Like, he is one of the masters and one of the great inspirations of what this art form is and what it became. And what is so wonderful about going back to his films and watching them is like, it's not, uh, it's no secret. Like, it's not something where you have to, oh, if I study, you watch his films and you're like, wow, like Rashomon is a great example. Like, if you're a Christopher
Yeah.
Nolan fan, go watch Rashomon and be like, oh, okay, this was not like before
Right.
that film. Like there are films like Citizen Kane that kind of touched on that sort of like that narrative that is happening out of sequence, but Rashomon was taking it to a whole other level and trying new
Yep.
things. And it is so much fun and always so exciting to go back to one of the great masters of cinema and just delve into their works. And that was what was so fun about when I was really obsessing and going through all of his films. But like, when you, sometimes it's easy to take it for granted when you're just kind of in that world.
Yeah.
And I think
Right.
even in that state of mind, High and Low kind of like rose above the rest. Again, like, I haven't seen it in a couple years, and I'm really excited because I just got the Criterion 4K for it, and I'm excited to watch that. But it's every time I watch it, I find myself admiring it more and more, and being more um, aware of just how much influence it has had on so many modern films. There's so many modern techniques in all of Kurosawa's films, but I'm excited to see what you end up taking away from High and Low, and
I'm
what you
chomping at the
see.
bit now. I'm
Yeah.
chomping at the bit. I got to see this thing. Let's get to it, man. I gotta catch it.
We will do that, and I want you real quick. Do you know anything about High and Low? Do you want to try to take a stab at the story? Just a random guess. What is this movie about?
I am going to guess, because I think I half read a synopsis of Spike Lee's adaptation that he did, but there's somebody who's well respected, who has a long career doing something, and then there's a whippersnapper that comes up, and the guy's left trying to defend his status.
Okay,
That's my
your
guess.
Okay,
That is
okay,
my
great.
guess at it. So
I am so excited for you to see that. I'm really excited to chat about this.
watch it be the one movie that Kurosawa did that was like Alien Invasion or something like that. You know,
you never know. You never know. He's
Never
inspired so many things. Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe.
It's possible.
All right,
It's possible.
all right. Let's do this. We'll watch it, and we'll be back. Stay tuned.
Now available to own on video cassette.
All right, we're back. John, how do you feel about High and Low?
Oh my goodness. I saw so many things in High and Low where there were so many moments where I would look at it and I would say, this is just like, and I would think of a movie that I've seen. I'm continually blown away by how impossible it is to overstate how much Akira Kurosawa predicted or influenced or drove film as an art form.
All of the above. Yeah.
And it's stunning, because you watch High and Low, it didn't go at all how I expected at all. especially for the era. I'm used to a very straightforward. I'm like, oh, like, because we talked about how like I had no idea what going in or anything like that. And then I saw, thank you, HBO Max. I saw like it was like a businessman grapples with the ethical dilemma of paying the ransom. I was like, well, all right, that's the movie I'm watching.
Right. You were saying more kind of like business rivalry, older man,
yes,
younger man. I think you were projecting our relationship, our working relationship when we met.
Yes, but I failed to mention the attractiveness of both. So, that was but like it's one of those things where like the gear shift that happens totally out of the blue, because like they resolved one thread. I was like, well, okay, I guess wait, what?
Yeah.
What's going on here?
There are a few moments like that in this movie where you're kind of I mean, narratively, Kurosawa is so brilliant, and sometimes there's some films where it doesn't work as well, and there are other films that are not Kurosawa films where this doesn't work as well. But it's that constant shifting, like you said, you're always kind of on the edge of your seat, never sure where it's going. I don't remember exactly what my reaction was when I watched it the first time, but I don't know that I knew the actual plot. I didn't know there was a kidnapping involved. So I'm watching it, and at the beginning, it's this businessman talking to his colleagues about this takeover of the company, the shoe company they run, National Shoes. Brilliant name.
Hey, straightforward.
And, it's easy to remember. And I'm thinking like, okay, so it's going to be kind of some sort of like navigating the choppy waters of business takeover and like money and blah blah blah, and then 10 minutes in, suddenly it's like a kidnapping movie, a child's kidnapped, and then it's not even his kid, it's his chauffeur's kid. Like, and it's like, what?
Right. So there's mistaken identity with the kids, and but on top of that, they handled it so incredibly well for the way a kidnapping happens, where suddenly it's like, wait a minute, where is he? And like it's dark outside, and mom starts freaking out, and it's like, oh, like any parent sees that scene, and you're like, oh gosh,
yeah,
like
you feel it in the pit.
Just as a spoiler for anybody who doesn't have kids who might be listening to this, there is at least once a week when your kids are little where you have that moment where you're like, wait, I just lost track of them. Yeah. And it's not about looking at your phone. It's not like that's not even involved. You're just like going along. You just take it for granted. The kid's at your side. And then like you stop and you're like, whoa. And like they just shifted sides on you, but you're like disoriented suddenly. But before we get into like the rest of the movie, I want to say that there was a stunning moment about the film, because there were three things that like really struck me that sort of like rooted it to a time and made me think about things in a really unexpected way.
And you knew, just real quick, because this, one of the things that captivated me about it was the first quote unquote contemporary Kurosawa film I'd seen. I'd seen mostly his films are period pieces, samurai films. So I remember starting this and being like, oh, it's, it's early 60s, but it's modern day, quote unquote. And I think you knew that going into it, but that was a surprise. I was like, oh, okay, I haven't seen this vein of Kurosawa before.
Right. Well, and that is another thing that's different, because I mean, you could even layer it on there, is one, when he mentions, I'm not terribly great with the names of the characters. Okay. So I know it starts with a G.
Gondo.
Right. Played by just played to pitch perfect, like amazing perfection. And it's just like so gloriously real the way that everybody's portrayed. But he mentions at one point, he's going, I've worked for National Shoes for, decades, except for my time in the war. And I literally got a minute past that. I was like, oh, that's weird. World War II is what he's talking about. Right. Oh, weird. Right? Oh, you fought for, that's a weird layer. Right. But then additionally, to see his kid and the chauffeur's kid running around playing cowboys and Indians, and it really was like a blast, because not a blast like haha fun, but like a blast of cold water to the face, because you see to your point about I'm used to seeing Kurosawa samurai period films, and then you sort of see this declaration on screen of how much American culture had infected Japan by that point.
Yeah.
Which is wild because the mom is still in the traditional dress, but the son's running around with a cowboy hat and a pistol. And that's weird.
Yeah.
It's really weird.
And there's just the capitalistic impulse, like just that, the business acumen, the way they're talking about this company, though.
Right.
It's a whole layer that I hadn't thought about either until you just bringing it up now. But we're in this post World War II era. Japan is at this point kind of back on its feet, but certainly very heavily influenced by the West. But I think also just it was such a strange thing seeing Kurosawa speak so directly about the issue, contemporary issues, because it's not that these are things that aren't addressed in his period pieces, but because this is a modern film happening in their modern day, he's directly speaking to specific situations and specific walks of life that are recognizable. And I know we're saying like modern and we keep putting quotes around it, but frankly, it still feels modern, even though it is it's taking place in the early 60s. 1963 was when the film was released, so we're probably talking like 62 is when it was filmed. It feels so contemporary. Like a lot of this stuff does not feel, other than the technology, thematically, emotionally, and then even again cinematically, Kurosawa is just such a genius and has so much influence over this art form. It all feels contemporary in the way it's talking about everything. And I think like the first time I saw it, I was just so blown away by that, because you get classic films, older films have a vibe where you're like, okay, I'm watching an older film. And of course that's here, the framing and the way certain scenes are laid out, the way certain like performances are enacted or acted out, but it just feels so modern in its technique and its storytelling. It's fascinating.
To sit there and look at the way he moves the camera and the way he splits up space, because that first part you basically never leave that room,
right?
But he keeps finding ways to set tableaus, and it's interesting because over on House Lights, we're looking at we're looking at Sherlock Holmes movies, and we looked at one from 1939 and from 1959. And it's like, it's still very stage. It's still very constrained. It's still very, theatrical in the way it's approaching. Whereas you see with Kurosawa, somebody who's really like, okay, this is what a camera can do.
Yes.
This is what we're going to do. We're going to shoot between the two people to frame the guy coming across, and the camera's going to spin around at the end, and we're going to see everybody. And it's still a very theatrical tableau, but you don't feel like it's theatrical. It feels more documentary.
Yes. Yeah.
And it, like, as a result, like, I can't help but think of all of the filmmakers, whether it's Scorsese or Coppola or Lucas. I look at this film and I go, whoa, I see so much influence on those guys, or even De Palma, where it's like, it kind of blows your mind, where it's like, holy cow, they really were so influenced by this guy. Like we're second order of magnitude influenced by them.
Yeah.
It's like so wild.
Well, and I just love when you have a great filmmaker who loves storytelling and is not pretentious about the art form, because what Kurosawa did so brilliantly is he understood the medium so well and was such an expert, such a master of his craft, that the mise-en-scène and everything about the frame is part of the story. Like you were saying, the way characters are positioned, the way certain people are standing, other people are sitting, to demonstrate the power difference, and like the dynamics between classes and how everyone relates to each other. It's that wonderful thing that happens where you see a master of their craft fully understanding the capabilities of their art form. And
right,
I think it's one of those films that when you listen to the commentary or you read behind the scenes tidbits or you start to dissect the film and what it's saying about society and about rich versus poor and privilege versus not privilege, you start to understand the way Kurosawa was like, here's how I want to demonstrate that visually. And I mean, it's such a joy as a fan of film to go back and rewatch this over and over again to pick up on those things.
Well, just even the themes and the way he explores, I couldn't help but think of Parasite and everybody celebrating
Right.
Parasite. And I'm like, forgive me for saying this because I enjoyed Parasite. I thought there's a lot of value to Parasite, but at the same time, I thought it was a little ham-handed at certain points. And then at the end, I was like, oh, this is a little much, right? He went a little far with everything, with the metaphor, as it were.
Right.
Whereas this is a very subtle thing and doesn't really come fully together until that final scene. And what director on earth nowadays would have the courage to end the film with the protagonist slumped over, faced away from the camera,
Right.
and basically saying to us, well, how do you feel about, like, and just ending it and walking away after you've seen this guy emotionally melt down because I had to look at you and go through this and start off saying, I'm not afraid to die. I was making a statement. I'm not. And then at the end, he's just a victim of desire. He's a victim of seeing that great success on the hill, looking down on him that whole time.
Right. And it's you know, the sin of coveting but
right.
It's also like the film is not necessarily, it's not sympathetic towards the kidnapper, but it's not detached from him either. A lot of that comes through, I think, the performance, but I think that final scene is really what it's really what hits the nail on the head. Is we sit with that moment and Gondo is kind of at what was the point of it all? And the guy's basically like, the point was I hate you. And it's
right.
like, okay, wow. Like, all right. And like you said, there's no feeling of resolution. There's no feeling of like, there's a victory in that, you know, the kidnapper is getting his due, but Gondo is still ruined. He has to start over. This horrible thing happened to him, and there isn't necessarily a comeuppance. Like it's kind of saying, like, you know,
nobody won.
Nobody wins here.
Everybody lost.
Yeah,
and it's that you do have this situation where Gondo is undone by his rivals who are trying to screw him over. So what was he climbing for anyway? He's trying to climb the next rung of the ladder when this happens. And then at the end, it's like, what were you bothering with that for? There's no happiness at any stage of this entire thing. Everybody's miserable. And the thing that hurts to an extent, and this is where it's going to be difficult for me to convey, so please help me out if it feels like I'm getting lost here. One of the things that, of course, everybody deals with when they encounter old films from America especially is, I'm going to pull very specifically Breakfast at Tiffany's. And you know why I'm pulling it in relation to this
I
discussion.
don't, because I have not seen Breakfast
You've never
at
seen
Tiffany's.
it.
Nope.
There is a racial stereotype in that movie that is really uncomfortable in a lot of ways. But I've always contextualized and said, yeah, it sucks, but America as a whole was dealing with the trauma of World War II. They were giving people, like, it was a really unhealthy thing.
I do think I know what you're talking about.
But I'm sort of like, I'm not excusing it, but I'm rationalizing it. I'm saying, like, I understand why
you're putting
people
you're contextualizing it,
right,
even more than rationalizing it.
And so I sort of like, I never gave it a pass, but I was like, it's the time.
Right.
But then I look at this film and Akira Kurosawa with this layered, beautiful, structured story, businessmen and class warfare and the crime procedural in the middle of it. Michael Mann, you're welcome. That sort of thing.
Well, David Fincher,
David Fincher, Michael Mann,
seriously.
all of them.
Yeah.
And I look at that and I go, like, it's embarrassing because I look at like, the nerve we had. This is the country that the only one, up to the point of this recording, who knows what the future holds, that's been nuked twice.
Right.
And like, there's a maturity to the film where I'm like, I'm not I don't feel like I can really contextualize Breakfast at Tiffany's anymore.
Well, I think, Japan in general, because their unique history and their approach to life, since I was a kid, I just, growing up and discovering anime and then really getting into Japanese films and, Kurosawa and other filmmakers. But like, Japan has such a spiritual, thoughtful, the culture in general is so spiritual and thoughtful in the way they approach things. And Kurosawa, I think, was one of the early artists who was giving voice to those complicated emotions and feelings about everything. It was never about pointing fingers or laying blame. It was almost like a sad acceptance of what the war was and what Japan's role in that war was. And so there's a humbleness to that culture and the way they see life, but it makes the interpretations they have of, like in this case, the class conversation and the rich versus the poor. There's, like I said, the kidnapper, you're not necessarily sympathetic towards him, but it's a clear-eyed view of him. It's not filtered through the filmmaker is obviously going to have a perspective no matter what, even if like they are trying to be as clear-eyed as possible. That is in and of itself a perspective. And I think what Kurosawa is trying to do in this situation, and the thesis statement by the end of the film is like there is nobody to blame and everybody to blame here. And just being that clear-eyed about it, I think is very ingrained in Japanese culture.
Well, I think what you see there, is that, film is an art form that's coming up, and it's something where America is a very young country. And I think that other countries in general with a lot more history are going to be able to it's the way they're going to communicate with the medium is going to reflect that long storied evolution of the culture coming up to that moment in time. It's just a bit different. And then of course blockbusters will undo us all, a few decades later. But it's so beautiful, because the thing is we're talking about Kurosawa, but I think it's important as well to really shout out, with the complex camera moves and everything, his, director of photography. We go handheld at certain scenes,
right?
When we're going through the drug users alley, right? And going through, it's so claustrophobic without getting confused. I have a clear sense of place.
The train sequence as well.
The train's
stunning.
It's insane. Everybody getting up and moving around and getting into the compact space. Like, there were specific moments where I was thinking to myself, because of the context we're watching the film, I'm like, how do they get the camera there? Like, it's, it's that sort of thing. Like, I completely believe I'm on a train that's traveling at high speed. Well, they have to remind, it's like
some of it
crazy.
is. I think some of it is actually on the train, and I don't know how much of it was a set. I mean, at a certain point, I think some of it had to be, but I think a lot of the movement, because the natural light that you get from the movement and just the feeling of movement when you're on a train is so different from when it's staged. And I think Kurosawa wanted that he wanted that reality. He knew you couldn't replicate it, so he was very careful about which shots were a live train that was actually moving versus on a set. And I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the cinematographer, I think he worked with two cinematographers, his older one, and then the one that he would work with from this point on into the future. And you have a lot of Kurosawa films before this that were sort of the full frame. I don't remember the exact specs of it, but this is the widescreen, so we're getting we have a lot of frame to fill, and it's so beautifully framed, and everything is so dynamic. And I just love the way it looks, and I love that sense of movement. I love the sense of experimentation. And Kurosawa would typically, he would always, I mean, he would use long lenses, and he would always have, I think, at least two cameras going during any given scene. So one would be kind of the static shot, and one would be moving. So it would make editing, it always made it, he always was clear about what the movements were and what he wanted from each one, but he wanted those options as well. But I just love I love the look of the film. I love that we start things off in this very kind of clean, air conditioned space. We spend a lot of time there. Like, I think maybe about, I want to say like 45 minutes of the film, that first 45 minutes is really just in Toshiro Mifune's home, and we're there with the police. And like you said, we get a lot out of that space. We get a real sense. Kurosawa he was always great at this, just the sense of staging and creating the space for the audience to understand where everything is in relation to each other. It expands beyond the home once we start to do the investigation and we start to go into the underworld, and we see that relationship between Gundo's house, the house on the hill, and this underground, this seedy underbelly of the society that they're living in. And I just love, I love the way it's all portrayed.
But even with the seedy underbelly that you're talking about, like, we then go, the rung, we go down rung by rung,
right?
And we wind up in the lowest of the low, which is the drug alley. But then it's literally, you feel like that is just around the corner from the nice downtown that they see each other at. And you have this great moment where the guy basically bums a light from Gondo.
Yes.
And the only thing I could think afterward, after the film was over, is like, how many times have I seen something like this? I know there was a part of my little lizard brain that was expecting, oh, we're going to find out that he's in on it or something.
Right.
Like, because that's exactly what an American director nowadays would do.
Right.
They'd be like, it turns out he staged the whole thing himself. And it's like, and then you have to sit there the rest of the movie. You're like, that doesn't even make sense. But you're spared that here.
Right.
And I think that, there's just that idea of all of those different rungs. But additionally, I got to give him credit for the staging of when the kidnapper goes and buys the drugs on the dance floor.
Right.
It's so beautifully done. Everybody crammed into the place, moving around. That is so, and making sure we can see their hands.
Yes, it's so kinetic, but like, again, just the complexity of the scene, but just the clarity with which we're able to see that switch of that sleight of hand where he hands the drugs off. It's so good. It's so good. And
it really is.
It's what Kurosawa, at this point, he'd been decades into his career, but he just mastered that understanding of being able to tell stories visually and trusting the audience to go along with him.
Well, I got to ask you though, because like I everybody absolutely acknowledges, Kurosawa is amazing. Like, what a storied career. And I understand why this is regarded as such an incredible film. I think it's incredible. I got to know though, like, is there anything that you think, like, does it drag for you at any point? Like, do you have any challenge with pace or anything?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about this because I think my early viewings, each time I have found that I maybe just because I'm familiar with the film and understand what it's trying to say, it's each viewing I've appreciated it and loved it more and more. I think the first time I saw it, I was thrown, to me, the most compelling part, and I found this a lot with Kubrick's works. When I watch Kubrick's films the first time I saw them, a lot of his films are kind of divided into a first half and a second half, where
Yeah.
everyone loves the first half and then the second half kind of drags. But then the more you think about it and the more you rewatch it, I'm thinking of like Clockwork Orange, Full Metal Jacket, Eyes
Yeah.
Wide Shut, like all of these. The more you start to think about it and appreciate what the second half is saying about the first half and how they throw each other into context. I think for me, the first time I was so invested in the story of the kidnapping with Gondo's chauffeur, his son. And so when that was resolved early on in the film, and when I say early on, I mean the film's about 2.5 hours long, so it's about an hour into the film, I remember thinking like, okay, so where are we going next? And the film shifts gears
Yeah.
into like police procedural, very, very detailed police, like step by step. We go through every point of this investigation with the police. And now I love it because I absolutely love the actor's name is Tatsuya Nakadai, one of the great Japanese actors. He was in Yojimbo, and I believe he was in Sanjuro as well before this.
I haven't seen either one of those either, so sorry for that.
Wonderful films. And he was also in The Human Condition, Harakiri. Incredible actor.
Which character did he play?
He played the lead detective in this film.
Oh, the lead. Oh, yeah. Yes. Okay.
So,
yeah, I know exactly who you're talking. Amazing.
I think because I was so invested in Toshiro Mifune, who's he's Gondo, the main character, quote unquote, but the film kind of has like 2 or 3. It's like he is the main character, and then it hands it off to the police, and then we hand it off almost to the kidnapper. The kidnapper sort of becomes the main character in the third act of the film. But I think this is all a long way of saying I was thrown by the switch from intense kidnapping plot and ransom and kidnapper and are they going to get the guy to methodical, slower paced, step by step detective work and police work and procedural. That threw me the first time I saw it, and not to the point where I was like, what, this film, I don't like this at all. But it was like, well, the first hour or so is much more engaging and exciting to me. But now I'm just so fascinated by the whole film and so fascinated by the whiplash of switching gears so completely. And as we've said, you see it so often employed in modern cinema, like David Fincher and other great filmmakers who have done similar things with their films. I'm more impressed by it. I'm more interested in what's going on. And I just love the dynamics and relationships of these officers, these detectives with each other. They're so dynamic and they all have such unique personalities. And I love that section of the film.
There is in terms of the switch, there was a book and I can't remember the title of it. I borrowed it from my dad, and we're talking, this is decades ago. So I remember it was written by, I think it was like Larry Niven and Larry McMurtry, right? So like weird pairing, right? Sci-fi writer, Western writer, but they both wrote one half of the book, and there was no like it was one wrote in this voice, one wrote in that voice. They're two completely different characters, and then the final scene is the two characters meeting, and you find out this all happened before the previous 2 parts of the book. So that's what ties it all together, sort of thing. And this is a similar sort of experience where I find it so satisfying because of that tie together scene. So much hinges on that.
Yeah.
So much hinges on that because that resolution scene then informs everything that you just experienced in the police procedural.
Right.
And it's one of those things where, like, no, you said it earlier, you're right. Kurosawa doesn't ask us at all to sympathize with the kidnapper at all, but we understand what he's been through. And you can't help but wonder now with that procedural part, that happens because the detectives, they clearly state it's our mission This is our job to make sure that Mr. Gondo is taken care of. We can't let him down.
Right.
And if they had simply said, look, you got the kid back, sorry about your money, and walked away, and it's cold case territory now, how different this guy's life was.
Yeah.
This isn't because Gondo went after him. It's because the police went after him.
Right.
And that in and of itself is really interesting.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that is what I have admired about that sequence is the relationship, the emotional connection the police develop with Gondo, even though it's not overtly stated, it's not obvious. But what happens is they see this man go through this moral dilemma where at first he's like, I'm not going to do it. It's not my responsibility. He tries to talk himself out of it. He tries to rationalize with himself why I can't pay this ransom. It's going to ruin my life. And then ultimately makes this incredible sacrifice because he is a good person. And you see the police recognize that. And so we as the audience end up like rooting for their investigation, not just because we want to see a bad guy taken down, but because of their cause is, yes, of course, we want to find this kidnapper, but we're doing it because we want to support and help this man who made a sacrifice that we admire. We admire this person.
Right.
And therefore, yes, it's our job to do this, but there is that emotional undercurrent, even though it's kind of stated like, it's like, think of Gondo, what he's going through. We see it represented by like him mowing his lawn and sweat, the sweat stains and, just that quiet recognition. And even at the end, when they're like, we've gotten back most of the money except the money that was spent on drugs, but then you have the creditors moving around the house and putting for sale signs and stickers on all the items. The victory it's a bittersweet victory, and you recognize the pain of that, but you also the nobility of everyone involved. It's almost like we talk about Real World and how grounded and contemporary it feels, but it's almost like in some ways it's like a why am I blanking? It's a Wonderful Life, Frank Capra film, where it's almost like everyone is a good person and they're all gonna help each other out, and we're all gonna, like, there is that feeling of we're all in this together that is sort of fantastical, but it's done so well and it's earned, and you go with it because the pain and the suffering is so genuine.
But the thing is that I get what you're saying with the Frank Capra thing, but it's also a social commentary in and of itself, because the kidnapper's cardinal sin is he just presumes because the guy is a rich guy, he must be an a-hole who doesn't deserve good things in life.
Right.
And it's like, so you layer that on where it's like, well, he's still a good person. He's more fortunate, yes, but he's still a good person. Like he's, the complexities of life and personality. I mean, this is the type of film that easily could turn someone into, and this is going to do this to me, it's going to put me on a Kurosawa kick.
Right.
Because I'm like, of course I've seen The Hidden Fortress and Seven Samurai. No lifelong Star Wars fan. It's like eventually we all read Hero with a Thousand Faces too. And we don't want to admit that it's boring as hell, but it is. But like, it's one of those things though, where it's like, yeah, this is part of the curriculum of being a Star Wars fan. Whereas this is outside that curriculum. And it's like, it's that moment. And I'm not saying I was ever like that, where it's like Kurosawa only had value in that sense.
Sure.
Like obviously the films were great.
But what you're saying is kind of what I was touching on in the first part. I feel like High and Low now is held in the regard that it should be, whereas before, George Lucas, not intentionally, I think it's just people grasped onto George Lucas referencing Hidden Fortress by name, and specifically their two servant characters who inspired R2D2 and 3PO. And Lucas was like, that unlocked the door for me, where we start with the droids, the servants. And that's kind of our humble way into this grand epic story. But people really latched onto that. So I think High and Low, even when it was first released, was kind of seen by critics as like, oh, it's good, but it's not like a major work of Kurosawa's. So it's like you're not guilty of anything other than what, like, I think High and Low as people have celebrated Seven Samurai, rightfully so, and Rashomon, other it's like, oh, wait a second, let's take a look at these other ones like Ikiru, which I think has always been held in high regard, but I think nowadays some would say it's his best film, which rightfully so. But some would say, this one and Redbeard and other films are worthy of being up there as well.
I because you said Redbeard, I thought it was so cool how they added the pink tint to the
yes,
smoke.
Yes.
Even though the rest of the film is in black and white.
And I think that's the first
little
time
splash of color.
Yeah, I think that's the first time there's color in a Kurosawa film.
It was so brilliantly done. Like
Yes.
it was just, it's shocking to see it. We're like, oh my gosh. Like, and I gotta say, like the score is so minimal, but every time they use like da da da,
right. Very
da,
dramatic.
da, da, and it's like
right, those big moments. Yes.
Yeah. It's almost like Hans Zimmer finding a drum set for a Superman movie or something. It's like, hey, all right, it's an important moment.
Well, it's also great too. Kurosawa, he did this in Seven Samurai, where they have that map, and they're drawing on it and saying, here's where we're going to set up our defense. Here's how many bandits there are. So it's like every time we then see that pay off visually in the action of the film, we just get a little kick because it's like, oh, we were in on the planning. Like, this is so cool. And it's another great example of setup and payoff where they've specifically said these suitcases will emit a smell. They will emit a color, a pink, smoky color. And so to have that payoff visually is just so wonderful. And Kurosawa does that brilliantly. Just that setup, something that feels arbitrary when an expository is then paid off in a way that feels really exciting.
Can I say something that is going to be weird, and it's a very personal thing, but the moment, well, no, it's just a weird thing. I just want to get it on record for time, as this,
I love when you get weird things on the record.
Yeah, as this goes out, like Robert Zemeckis starting Contact, at some point an alien species is going to hear these words somewhere out there. But with Gondo sitting down and saying, back to my apprentice days, he's like, I know how to cut the thing in and put it in there. Who I saw in that moment was my dad, because my dad, he worked for the phone company his entire life. Well, I mean, not since childhood, but like basically it was his whole professional career. And he was a guy who went up in the cherry picker and worked on the phone lines back before they had the wisdom to bury them. Phone company smarter than the electric company, but whatever. And so he was the one, but he wound up, climbing up the ranks, and like eventually he gets an office job, and he's like helping like build computers and stuff like that. Always an engineer at heart. But I see my dad in that scene, and it's such a beautiful thing, because when my wife and I moved into our first house, it was a flip house, right? Because it was before the market crash that caused all of the housing values to fall, whatever.
Right.
They had rented out the 3 different levels of the townhouse before they flipped it, right? So each floor had a different phone line coming in. So only one phone line worked. And I know, kids, this is landline stuff, so I'll speed it up at this point because nobody uses it anymore. But basically my dad, I was like, they want, $150 per jack and everything. And my dad's like, okay, all right, I'm going to come out there. And he came out there, and he still had his old toolkit from when he was the guy that went and worked on the lines.
Right.
And I remember him looking at me, and he's dead now, so they can't sue him. He looks at me, he goes, don't tell anybody I did this, because I can get in a lot of trouble. And he rewired our whole house because he remembered how to do it.
Oh, that's great.
And it was brilliant. But when I see Gondo in that scene, like, it's so relatable. You learn in that one moment, because he makes a comment to his wife, you've always had money, you don't know what it's like.
Right.
And the thing is, if you stop and you think about it, at the end, that guy, again, the kidnapper, is presuming Gondo's had money his whole life.
Yeah.
And Gondo's like, no, I started out pretty low too, and I climbed my way up. And so like you get that whole aspect of the class warfare thrown in there. And it's like, it's so beautiful. It's gorgeous. It's such a, I don't know.
Well, it's also like just again, speaking of the framing and the blocking, is, he is sitting on the floor and like getting his hands dirty. And you see it, like, all the police around him are just kind of watching him and amazed by him. Right. And again, it provides that emotional connection and that motivation for them later on to really, really like, we're going to get this guy, and not only get this guy, but we're actually going to set him up in a way that will ensure his punishment is
Right.
worse than it would have been. It's something else Kurosawa was commenting on. Part of his motivation for telling the story, I think, was because the punishments for kidnapping in Japan prior to World War II, it wasn't a serious crime, so the punishments weren't serious. But post World War II, there was an increase in child kidnapping, and the punishments remained too lenient for a little while. So I think at this point, by the time the film had come out, the punishments were a little bit more serious. But Kurosawa was basically saying, like, hey guys, like, doesn't this seem stupid to you that this guy was only going to get off like 5 years or something? Not even that.
Yeah.
A year.
Yeah.
No, you know, and the emotional devastation, or just not, you know, emotional, physical, everything, like the devastation caused by this simple act is so beyond what the actual punishment was. Like, I think Kurosawa was really speaking to that and saying, like, guys, come on. And I think, like I said, I don't know the exact timing, but I do know somewhere around this point, those punishments became much more severe than they were.
Rightly so, for sure. I mean, it's if people listening haven't figured it out yet, this is a movie you should see. If you haven't seen it,
you should see it.
You should definitely go ahead and catch that.
Did you feel like, you know, we were talking about the pacing and just the brilliance of that procedural section, but did you feel any sense of, did it throw you off at all? For my first viewing, it kind of did. Were you into it? Like, did you feel?
Oh,
like,
I was all for it because I love gear shift movies.
Yeah.
And so I steal that from a friend of the show, Mike Schindler. He's the one that first used gear shift movie with me. And I'm like, I've used it ever since. But I loved it because it was one of those things where I was like, I realized I was like an hour in. I was like, I still got an hour and a half. Like what? I was like, honestly, what I was afraid of, that it was going to be like a mopey hour and a half of like the husband and wife are like having hard
falling
times
apart,
because he hesitated or something like that. I've seen that enough. But yeah, to shift over and it's like, then it's a police procedural and suddenly it's their movie. It's like, oh, this is really interesting. And I never once got bored. I was always fascinated. I was always in it, and seeing the kidnapper, you know, paying attention to the newspaper clippings and the, even seeing the bosun go and talk to the garbage guy.
Right.
Who's like, that's another aspect of life that we're seeing right there. It's like, what a life this guy has.
Right.
Like he's complaining. He's like, oh, they always throw tin in. That doesn't burn. What's wrong with them? He's like throwing it out the window and everything like that. Yeah.
There's such I mean, all the supporting characters, each one of them they each have their own personality. And I think that's what keeps that second part of the film so interesting, is just we are so exposed to how the society works, and we have such a strong understanding of it by the end of the film. And we understand what this place is, what the dynamics are, what the class differences are, and how they all interact with each other. And it's so good. I'm just thinking of like, when we even like when we transition into the second half of the film, how we're looking at the house on the hill and the detectives are kind of like, yeah, you know, I'd kind of hate that guy too. Like, look at that house is kind of looking down. They walk off and then we pan down to the gross water. We see the kidnapper's reflection and suddenly we're following him into the muck of his life. And it's all just so good, but it's all in the service of the story. Like, it's not that's the brilliance of it, is when you see somebody who is so confident in what they have to bring to the table, like Kurosawa was. It is just so enjoyable. It is so, because it makes for more effective, more compelling, and more engaging storytelling. And then it's just so much fun to think about it, to talk about it, to go back and revisit it, and really start to break it down and analyze it. But what were some other things that stood out for you? Like, you know, we talked about like David Fincher. We talked about the crazy influence of Kurosawa in this film. But what are some other things that you loved?
I mean, I think that you know, the actor who played the chauffeur was brilliant he was heartbreaking. Like that's another aspect of the culture that you see where he's on his hands and knees. I'll do anything for the rest of your life. I swear to God, just help. Like when he throws himself down, I think that like probably if I were to recommend like one scene as like the calling card scene that I think is just brilliant. And I don't know. I mean, it's more a piece of it. Like you have to pick. Obviously, there's the ending scene in the, in the jail. But like in the kidnapping part of it, it's the sitting down on the floor and showing him putting the little packets in the suitcases, right? And then in the police procedural part, for me, it's really like the part that really is wild is that the sequence where they go to the drug alley. Like I know I made reference to it before, but there's so many things where the sense of place is so real. I never doubt it.
Yeah. It's the sense of unease too, even in the music, like it's very.
But what's especially crazy about the drug alley part is, again, drawing the comparison to American cinema, right? Reefer Madness and all of this stuff. It's like this overblown, like the Kurosawa, like I believe that this is probably how the drug alley was. Like, it's a bunch of people, tweaking and like, they look filthy and needy and, like, but it's not like the way American cinema was portraying drug use at the time. It feels much more authentic. And even the fact that the camera doesn't flinch from showing us the dead addict.
Yeah.
With the needle in her hand and, the Mia Wallace trickle of vomit, right down her chin. And it's like, it's one of those things where I struggle for the words because of the fact that it's weird to encounter a film from 1963 that can still sort of leave you in awe of what it accomplishes.
Yeah.
I'm not taking anything away from American cinema. Obviously, like, yes, I've seen Touch of Evil and Citizen Kane and other movies that aren't by Orson Welles and stuff like that. But like, it's one of those things where there is a true sense of cinema as a pure art form here that makes you stop and watch it, not because you just want to get to the next scene, not because you are solely invested in what happens next. Like you said, the characterizations, it takes the time for me to feel like I know these cops. Like Bosun, I loved Bosun the entire time. He was so much fun.
Yeah.
And the way he has almost that same tell that you see in other Kurosawa films of the old man rubbing his bald head, right. Like it's so beautiful in that sense. And, so, like I think at the end of it all, it's that you're drawn in to this work because the work itself is beautiful and everything else is secondary. It's just a given that it's beautifully structured and well written and very well performed. And also it's so weird seeing Toshiro Mifune in such a subtle role. I've seen him with very large performances before this, but he's very restrained here.
He and Tatsuya Nakadai, the detective, they are very not cast against type, but outside of the image that we know them for. And at the time, it was the same thing. Mifune seeing, we're going to go see a Kurosawa Mifune film, and you see him like this. It's almost kind of like when you saw like Robert De Niro in King of Comedy after Raging Bull. You're like, wait a second, what's going on here? It's that similar, to use Schindler's term, gear shift. Mifune, everything is insular. He has the intensity, Like there are moments where you'd see the flashes of the Mifune character, quote unquote, that we've seen in other films like Seven Samurai and Throne of Blood, and even Stray Dog, which is another an earlier film of Kurosawa's that shares a lot of this one's DNA. But so much of it is just subtle, understated intensity, and a lot of the final scene, of course, brings all of that home because he doesn't do much or say much. He is there fully in service to the kidnapper.
Every time I unlock a different Mifune performance, I can't help. Yes, again, lifelong Star Wars fan, everything like that. I can't help but think of the fact Lucas wanted him for Obi-Wan originally. And I'm like, what a different effing movie that is.
Right.
What a different like, there's got to be some alternate universe. One of you Doctor Who types out there, help me out, right? Like, there's got to be a Doctor Who universe guy that's going to take me over where I get to see Star Wars with Toshiro Mifune in it.
That would be so good.
I mean, like I think that's like face meltingly wild.
Right.
It's probably not as accessible, right? Because the great British actor makes it so much more accessible for American audiences and turn it into what it is, sort of thing. But it would have been such an interesting film.
I know.
To see him in it.
And this was, I think, Mifune and Kurosawa, they did Redbeard after this, and I think that was the end of their collaboration.
Really?
And so it's just a very interesting, like, those two films feel like a shift in Kurosawa's his filmography, just thematically, tonally, high and low feel there. And The Bad Sleep Well, I can't remember exactly where that is in relation to these. I think it's a little bit before, but he shifts from, it's not pure optimism. Rashomon is not like it's an optimistic film in that the ending is kind of has an optimistic vibe to it.
Well, that's not how I recall it.
But he shifts from being more like heroic and celebratory of like with Seven Samurai and Hidden Fortress. These are exciting, fun films. Throne of Blood is dark. It's Shakespeare, but like it feels like at this point he shifts, and Redbeard is kind of walking the line between that optimism and that pessimism. But Kurosawa tried to take his own life at some point not long after this because because his films were he kind of didn't lose it, but the films were not being as well received. There was the Deskadin, and then what was the other one? I can't remember the name of it. It's really good, but he really struggled for a little bit. He felt like he was out of touch with society and what people wanted from modern film.
That's so heartbreaking. Like that,
I know.
and that speaks in and of itself. Like when you think about it, that somebody as gifted, as talented, as amazing, as influential as Kurosawa can feel that way. That type of story needs to be shared. I had no idea about that. That type of story needs to be shared far and wide, so that the next time somebody wants to come in and play insult comedian with a work that somebody made, there's a place for criticism, sure, but maybe consider the human being on the other end of that one.
100%. And
I say that on the 10th anniversary of near the 10th anniversary of the release of Batman versus Superman. So try to remember that there's a human being receiving your criticism on the other end.
Interesting.
I was guilty of it too. Okay, it's 10 years of some conversations I'm not proud of anymore.
Look, you can dislike a movie, just don't hate
the person
needlessly the people who made it. I think there is a shift in tone to darkness and pessimism and less hope in humanity that we start to see in High and Low. And we've seen it in other films, but I think because of this film's placement in his filmography, because he and Mifune only worked together one more time, and I don't remember I think it was just a falling out. I think it was just
Bill Murray and
Mifune.
Harold Ramis eventually got tired of
Yes,
working together too.
I think it was that. It was literally that. It was just, look, I'm done. Like, I don't want to do another one of these. Kurosawa was, a notorious perfectionist, very difficult. And I think Mifune was just like, I can't do this anymore. I'm exhausted by this process. I think it's a fascinating film to look at in the scope of Kurosawa's filmography, and to take that bird's eye view and see where High and Low kind of falls in that area. And you look at the films like Kagamusha and Ron, which in particular is another one of Kurosawa's masterpieces. Just the darkness of that film and the sheer despair. High and Low still believes in humanity, and I feel like Dersu Ursula, I think is the other film I was thinking of, and that's a really good one too. But I think you start to see the darkness seep in with this film.
Oh my gosh, yes. Because basically at the end of it all, it's like who's wrong, who's right.
Yeah.
The system sucks.
Yeah, this even when
it's inevitable that bad things are going to happen because the system sucks. And it's like
even when the bad are punished and the good quote unquote triumph, there's still no real winner. Everyone loses, like you said. So it's incredibly morally complex, and like you said, even in the early 60s, to have a film end that way and just kind of be like, what, it's a pretty high demand of the audience. And I think even now it still feels that shock, and that the intensity of that ending, you still feel it today, that sense of like things are just left unresolved, really, and you just kind of feel like ugh. But
yes.
Yeah. Anything else?
Thank you for suggesting this film.
Sure. Well, I'm really glad you enjoyed it, and I'm really excited to see if you decide to delve into more of his films.
It's actually, you know what? We're going to be going into part of what pointed us toward Kurosawa is on House Lights here on the network. We're going to be, as of this recording, in the near future, looking at a bunch of Kurosawa films.
Oh, that's going to be so good.
Yeah. And Rashomon will be one of them.
Yeah.
So looking forward to that. And
it's so much fun. It's one of the great joys in life, especially like if you're a film fan, finding a great filmmaker and just sitting down and saying, you know what, let me just start at the beginning and just go all the way through.
Well, we won't be watching his entire filmography because that would take up the rest of 2026.
I will say there's a film called One Wonderful Sunday that Kurosawa did before Kurosawa became Kurosawa. It's before Rashomon. I think it's like 1947, 48. And it, to me, is like a precursor to Before Sunrise. It is about
Wait, hold on. I'm writing this down right now. Yeah, seriously, ladies and gentlemen, I'm actually picking up a pen like the olds do.
My God. Let's see. One Wonderful Sunday. It is a film that no one talks about, I feel like, except for me. 1947. It is... very post World War II. Japan is still recovering. This young couple, it all takes place in a day, and they want to go out on a date. It's the only day of the week they can see each other, and just them trying to enjoy that day, despite like it feels like the precursor to Linklater. And to those slice of life films. And I feel like nobody talks about it. And I love it so much. It's one of the great underrated Kurosawa films. And again, I think it's because it came out prior to Rashomon. It doesn't do anything like, crazy groundbreaking for like, oh, Rashomon was out of sequence and blah, blah, blah. But it feels so like High and Low. It feels very contemporary in that slice of life way. I would highly recommend it to everyone listening if you haven't seen it.
Well, maybe it's somebody's Missing Frame.
Oh. What do we want to do for a rating system? How many briefcases? How many pink
how many
smoke spraying briefcases?
Yeah. How many grandmother couch upholstery briefcases do we want to give this?
Yeah, with 5 being the highest and 1 being the high and low. How do you feel?
5. Easy.
5, yes.
It's a brilliant film. It's flawless. It's
5
just
for me.
magnificent.
Something else very interesting, just speaking of the title of the film, the Japanese title translates to heaven and hell, and they changed it to high and low. I guess they thought it would be more
they knew
appealing.
They knew that Oliver Stone was going to need to borrow that later.
But it is so, like, again, just the brilliance of it. Like, it is so that is so demonstrative of what the film does. It takes you from heaven all the way down to the depths of hell. I love it. I love this movie so much. Definitely, it's like definitely top 3 Kurosawa for me, probably, and one of the great films of all time for sure.
Easy. Agree.
All right. Well, John, thank you for hanging out, and why don't you tell the good people at home where they can find you?
I'm Kessel Junkie online. And here on this network, I'm on the aforementioned House Lights, where we look at the work of directors. That's with Tristan Riddell and Darren Moser. And you can hear me on Aggressive Negotiations, a Star Wars podcast that keeps on going. We're 10 years in and still having fun. So go ahead and give those a listen. And Shawn, I know that here on Missing Frames, people can hear you, but where else can they annoy you online? Because I want people to annoy you.
I know you do, John. And they can do so at Shawn on Twitter. I'm ShawnDorman05 on Letterboxd and at ShawnDorman on Instagram. And that is that. John, thank you so much. We should do another Kurosawa film in the not too distant future.
I'm on board.
If you haven't exhausted all the options on House Lights, we'll figure something out.
We'll watch High and Low 2.
we should
yes.
Highest to lowest. That would be I don't know.
Actually, wait a minute.
Yeah. What's up?
Yeah, is it highest to lowest? Is that the Spike Lee one?
That's the Spike Lee one, yeah.
I feel obligated at this point.
I think so.
Although I did see Chirac, and I don't know how excited I am about that. So.
I just keep thinking about the Old Boy remake and how meaningless everyone said it was. I still haven't seen Old Boy, the original Old Boy. I haven't seen any old
I haven't
ones.
seen Old Boy either.
Well, that might
there
be
you go.
one too.
That could be.
But
I'm
just like, when you have a movie like High and Low, I'm like, is it just going to depress me? Even with Denzel in it, is it just going to depress me to watch
Probably.
this kind of meh remake of a great movie?
So maybe we just need to go harass Brad and get him to watch Ghosts of Mars with us.
We'll do that. We'll do that. Perfect. Well, thank you, John, and thank you, everybody, for listening. We will see you at the movies.